and this is on ensuring the right to health. This morning, we saw Essential Islanders, and we had a very deeply powerful conversation earlier on that should tie into what we're gonna be speaking about today, now in this session. So by way of introduction, Professor Dina Sheck is a licensed attorney in the state of Hawaii, and she is the legal director for the Medical Legal Partnership for Children in Hawaii. She's a proud graduate of the William S. Richardson School of Law, which, woo, shout out. Yeah. We're so proud to be featuring alumni and faculty, where she's currently serves as a faculty specialist. Prior to entering law school in 2003, she spent nearly 10 years as a community organizer, educator, and advocate for social and community justice. She also has extensive development and fundraising experience, all of it on behalf of the public sector. Professor Sheck holds a Master of Arts degree from San Francisco State University in Ethnic Studies, and in 2012, she was named the Rhoda Lewis Award recipient presented by the Hawaii Women's Legal Foundation, and she received the Distinguished Service Award from the Japanese American Citizens League for her work with Micronesian communities in Hawaii. Hawaii Business Magazine featured Professor Sheck as one of their 20 for the next 20 people to watch in 2013. And I know that she's probably like, oh, why are they reading my whole bio? And I think it's important for all of us to know like who's in the room. I know as Pacific Islanders, respect humility, but we want to know all the work that you've done and continue to do. So I'll hand the mic over to you, and this mic can be for the panelists.
Thank you so much, Keone. Tiro. So many years ago, I was invited to present at the Chuk Women's Conference by a friend of mine, friend of ours who has been mentioned a few times already. Does this sound okay? The late Dr. Jojo Peter. I asked him how I should begin in order to show my respect and humility before such an esteemed audience. And he tried to teach me to express my respect with Tiro Womi Tiro Womi Menisen.
Yeah.
And I practiced and he tried, and finally he was like, just say Tiro. So I try to remember to pay my respects, but truly, Tiro to all my teachers in the room today. I see so many of you friends, fellow organizers who are really my organizing family, and so many really experts in the community today. Mr. Naich, it's such an honor to finally meet you in person after years on Zoom, and to all the students who I learn from every single day. So truly, Tiro. And I also want to echo Ian Tapu's acknowledgement yesterday of our law school's ancestor, Chief Justice Richardson. At this law school, we truly strive to live up to his example of serving the people in the place of Hawaii as Richardson lawyers in all that we do. Okay, so thank you so much for having all of us. So this panel was asked to look at the impact and the role of law and policy and ensuring the right to health for COFA citizens. In response, the panelists actually wish to continue with the storytelling that has been the string throughout this weekend and sharing stories of health. So stories of health that I think will take you on a journey around Oceania by way of Hawaii to Arkansas, yes, as we've heard, Oceania that lives in Arkansas, and back across the Pacific to Palau. So stories of health, stories of the good fight and ultimate victory, the fight to restore Medicaid benefits for Micronesian people living in Hawaii, the continental US and its territories. Stories of building health and building wellness and building community in Arkansas. And then stories of healthcare heroes back home in Palau. So that's our plan for today. So this panel has two doctors who graduated from the John A. Burns School of Medicine here in Hawaii, two founding members of the Micronesian Health Advisory Coalition, a former Peace Corps member, a former police officer. This is like a quiz, right? It's like a truth and a lie. Three published authors, an actor and poet, and probably millions of travel miles between them. So please read their full bios in the program, and I'll share a little about them now. And I think I'll go in the reverse. I'm going to introduce in the reverse order of how they're going to speak today. So Dr. Greg Devers served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Palau in the late 60s and later graduated from the Johnny Burns School of Medicine, JABSOM, where he was a National Health Service Corps Scholarship recipient. He trained as a pediatrician at Kapiolani Women Children's Medical Center, and for 35 years, he served as clinical faculty and professor at JABSOM's Department of Pediatrics. Some highlights from his bio include work with the Guam Department of Health and Social Services and Guam Memorial Hospital, director for JABSOM's Pacific Basin, I'm a lawyer, I talk fast, so. JABSOM's Pacific Basin Medical Officers Training Program, the Palau Director of the Bureau of Hospital and Clinical Services, interim director of the Pacific Island Health Officers Association. I can never say the full name, I just know it as PIHOA. And most recently, director of the Palau Area Health Education Center. Welcome, Dr. Greg. So wonderful to have you. Dr. Sheldon Ricklin is a family physician and an associate professor in the Department of Family and Preventive Medicine and a co-investigator in the Office of Community Health and Research at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences Northwest Campus. He is the inaugural recipient of the Peter O. Kohler, MD, Endowed Chair in Health Disparities. I just love that they even have an endowed chair for health disparities. And the 2021 Dr. Edith Irby Jones Excellence in Diversity and Inclusion Lifetime Achievement Award. Dr. Ricklin serves most of his time in clinical care with roles at Community Clinic at Springdale, as well as UAM's, is that what we call it? North Street Clinic and Fayetteville Family Medical Center, but also works with the UAM's Community Health and Research team in community-engaged research activities with the Marshallese community. Dr. Ricklin is a founder and past chair of the Micronesian Health Advisory Coalition here in Honolulu. He serves as a board member of the Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families, National Council of Asian Pacific Islander Physicians, and the Asian and Pacific Islander American Health Forum. Welcome, Dr. Sheldon. Inocenta Sankiku is from the beautiful island of Lucanor in Chuuk State, Federated States of Micronesia. She's a celebrated community leader, and just last year, she was awarded the 2021 Uluhana Peva Award from the Partners in Development Foundation. As you saw yesterday morning, Ino is the founder and leader of the intergenerational youth program Pacific Voices at Kokua Kalihi Valley. She currently serves as the vice chair of the Micronesian Health Advisory Coalition. With 10 years of law enforcement as her background, she's the police officer. She is an active advocate, storyteller, interpreter, teacher, auntie, mama, and cultural navigator who has a particular passion for women and children. I'll turn it over now to the woman often called Mama Ino, Auntie Ino. She's also known as my sister, fellow organizer and frequent partner in crime, Inocenta Sankiku. And so I wanted to start with Ino, and I was debating like how much I had to go into the health story that I wanted her to talk about. But actually, for those of you, and it's so wonderful to see all of you here on a Sunday morning. Catherine Obashan actually had shared a lot about the Basic Health Hawaii struggle for Medicaid benefits in the state of Hawaii from a lawyer's perspective. So what I really wanted to ask Ino to do was share more from the grassroots perspective of what happened during that time, all the way up through our victory. And I warn you folks, I got my Kleenex out already, but thank you, Ino.
And I'm ready with mine. Oh, thank you very much, Dina. Thank you very much, Iani and your team. Thank you to all of you that are here today. Thank you for this space, for sharing. And I don't know how I got to be the first one to speak when we agreed that Sheldon was supposed to be speaking. Now they're flattering me. But thank you so much for allowing me to share our story. Like Joe said yesterday, it is about relationship. And only because of this relationship that we're able to be where we are today. But it all began when one day, somebody asked me, did you know that they're gonna cut off your health care? And offhandedly, I said, who said that? There cannot be anything like that happening to us. In denial at first, right? But yet, there was really something going on. As a matter of fact, it was our first day of gathering for the healthcare forum that we found out that they really are going to cut off our healthcare. And Sheldon and I, we were fortunate to have many leaders and elders amongst us that came to that first gathering. And because Dr. Sheldon and Dr. Alec were not available that day, they kind of like tell me to do the first meeting. So I changed the agenda and make us talk about the actual cut off of the healthcare, if any one of them even know of it. And guess what? 6 months into it, people already know, but nobody told us. And many of us didn't realize how serious that was. So immediately, right there and there, we mobilized and we were tasked to do different things. Someone was tasked to visit our consul general office. Someone was tasked to go to the different agencies to find out what really happened. And then the elders were tasked to go to the first meeting to hear the hearing on what was going on. My dad was one of those. And of course, I gave up my career to come and take care of him. And I thought, oh, I am not gonna be involved in any of this. Guess what? If you are the eldest, you will be put to multitask and do everything that your parents tell you to do. No matter how old you are, you're still a child. And so I watched these elders. They stood strong and they tell their story in front of the Human Services Department or whatever they call that. And what struck me at that moment, when I was not willing to be involved, I was ashamed because I saw earlier they were, standing with flyers and they stand on the side advocating for something else. And I thought, I'm not gonna even do that. Even though I'm there, I will hide my face behind the boards. But that day, I was ashamed for not understanding what those elders were really doing at the time. And my dad was speaking, and he said, if you move forward with this basic health Hawaii, my family have to prepare to put me 6 feet under. I was brokenhearted and I was crying like a baby right there because I do not want to give up and do that for my dad. So I make a promise right there and then I will do whatever it takes to not put him 6 foot under and continue to tell our story. And in that same room, there was another elder from Marshall Island who strongly stood up and said, how many more broken promises do we have to face? How many more lives do I have to sacrifice for the wellness of the world? What about us? Right there, and then I was like, that's it. We are gonna do whatever it takes for people to hear our stories. And it just so happened, Jojo Peter came from Chuk at that time, and we're like, Jojo, you will be our voice, and we will do whatever it takes to go wherever and tell our story. And little did I know, he will put me in every talk space to talk in healthcare classroom. I'm like, that's not what I'm asking for. And so we did. We went to everywhere that they will hear us talk. Because it begins with telling our story. Even though it was embarrassing, and even though we were faced with questions that broke our heart, we stood strong. Because whatever we do, it really matters. Or our elders right there will definitely be 6 foot under. And we mobilized. We did whatever we could. Sheldon and I, for 6 months, I don't know how we did it, but we went, we gathered the kids, we gathered the youth in the community, and we promised them if they play sports, we will do health outreach with them. Whatever money they put together, we will raise some kind of fund to help us take the state to court. How is that possible? And we continue to speak in spaces, even like this, to tell our story. What really scared me at one point was that who will hear us and what will they think of us? They're already calling us cockroaches. They're already picking on our children. They're already beating up on our elder women who are in the bus stop wearing our traditional clothes. And the story goes on. So the kids play, they buy into the fact that they are involved in the fight for healthcare because they're playing sports, they're keeping healthy, and we're able to take the state to court. We won in the state. We lost in the state, but we won in the federal court. And I remember in one of those talks, representative, I think from Kalihi, or I'm not sure who it is, I kind of said, we are small people. Nobody listens to us. And he corrected me right there and said, you are not small people. There is nothing micro about us. And we want to echo that. Nothing is micro about us. We are resilient and we are caring people, and we will continue to do whatever it takes to tell our story so we can change the frame of tomorrow. So our fight continues. Josie and I will go to Washington, and I will cry my heart out, and I will beg them to listen to our story. And afterwards, Josie will be like, girl, why do you have to start with that? Because anywhere I go, I will shed my tears, and I don't care because it is something real for us. If we don't feel anything, we cannot do anything either. We must feel for each other. We must continue to build that relationship. We must continue to change the future for tomorrow. And I'm so proud of these young men and women. And let me tell you, yesterday, those kids, they said, one day I will be sitting in this room. You already changed that. One of them knocked out, and I thought he didn't even hear anything. But guess what? He did. He still hears it. I didn't know that's what's going on with us. But we need to create spaces for them to hear their story. Sorry. Because tomorrow is for them. And you've created that. We have placed that dream in their heart to change. And thank you so much for allowing them, inviting them to come to this space to learn. And I do pray that they will be one of those kids sitting in this room, as they already said. I said, I will remember that, and I will pray for you, and I will promise you, because you said it. You are speaking into the world, you are speaking into the universe, and it will happen. Because it begins with a dream. And that is what happened with us. We were dreaming of a better future. Regardless of what happened to us, we still are dreaming for a better tomorrow. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I will give back to this gentleman so that they will tell their story as well. Thank you.
Travel the Pacific Coast to Arkansas now.
Good morning, everyone. Yahweh Kaselelia Tuo Kiriso Chapur Tiro Mukatin Ali Apate Alawakako. Very honored to be here this morning. Sorry, you know God me to do that. I think as I grow older, I get more emotional. That to the point that my wife, every time I try to go in front, she said, don't cry. So I was trying to avoid her as I came down, but it didn't work. But really happy to be part of this panel. And again, thank you to Keone and the APLPJ folks, 17 lawyers strong. That's awesome. Thank you to everybody, and thank you for the invitation to Dean Nelson and the Richard S. William Law School for the invitation to be part of this. When I got the invitation, it came from a law and policy journal at the law school. I'm a doctor, right? Normally, doctors and lawyers don't get along, right? But when you put them together, they were forced to be reckoned with. And it's since yesterday until today, it's just been amazing to kind of listen to all these stories. And when this panel, the questions came up as far as how we're going to address the questions and what's been talked about. So I'm happy that many of the things that we thought we were going to talk about, whether it was healthcare, whether it was Arkansas, kind of came out with many of the sessions yesterday, including the very powerful film in progress. And it's been very rewarding in that aspect. Really want to also recognize our late brother, Jojo Peter, one of our good friends, Gregory Musgranic as well. Yeah. But, it's many of the work that we do, again, has to do with the relationship and has to do with that people concept, right? And we talked about it yesterday, COFA, who are the COFA? And it came out again and again, like Brother Joe also said. But the late Joe and Peter it's not just us from the FAS nations, right? It's all of us. You cannot have a treaty, you cannot have a compact by yourself, right? It's a bilateral agreement. And, it's just proud of the work that many of us continue to do. Some of the community leaders that we heard about yesterday, what we just heard about, Senda talked about today, and some of the history that has come through that. Many of the challenges that we face in Arkansas is the same. It's the same here. Maybe we have a little bit more support, but our numbers are also growing. We also have very strong leaders. Also want to recognize Benedict Madison, who's our executive director for Marshall East Educational Initiative. He's one of our young, active leaders. He's out there talking about the nuclear legacy and climate change as well, and how that also interrelates with health. And I brought my laptop because just in case I needed from what points I was going to make. But it was more because it seems like every time that I come in the front, I get more nervous. But in Arkansas, we definitely felt it, especially when COVID hit. And like that film had mentioned, as we were hearing about the numbers and the virus, and this is a new virus, right? That came out in December of 2019. As we were listening to the people that were going to be affected by it, it was just basically us. And I'm talking us Marshallese because that's what we're hearing there, but it's basically Micronesians, right? All the risk factors that we had were the risk factors for people who got hospitalized, who got intubated, and who died by the virus. Estimation of Marshallese in Arkansas, yesterday, the professor Emily mentioned 12,000. The film earlier says between 12 and 15,000. And I think that is the right projection. Not a day goes by that you go to Major Airport when people are flying out of the islands. And most of them are coming to Arkansas. And even our leaders back home say that on the legislative floor, because people are trying to find ways to make a living. I mean, we travel to different places so we can find ways to support our families. The Micronesian way is take care of others, right? Before you take care of yourself. But many of us forget that part, that we seem to just kind of take care of others and forget about taking care of ourselves. But that's part of the reason why we have all these health disparities that we face. I mean, thankfully, we got the restoration of Medicaid for COFA citizens. In Arkansas, when you mention COFA, not too many people know about it because most of them are just Marshallese. Majority of the Pacific Islanders in Arkansas, I mean, you just gotta come and travel and come and see Arkansas. I mean, unless you come and see it, you really don't have that full concept of what it is. It's amazing. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's in the South. It's not the Pacific Islands, but we feel at home at the same time. Our neighbors consider us as their neighbors, right? Many of us are essential workers, as shown by the film. And we are quite actively involved in many of the things that we do. So enough so that we have Marshallese community-based organizations. The University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, the Office of Community Health and Research has 30 plus Marshallese staff who do all their work with the community. They're the ones who actually connect the community with their researchers in capacity building, in educating them about diabetes, prevention, management, using the family model and not the individual model. I mean, we know that CDC came up with the diabetes self-management education model, but for us Marshallese and us Micronesians, it's about the family. It's not about the individual. So when you do the teaching them about what medications they need to take, what diet they need to follow, you need to take that all into consideration. So we still face that in Arkansas. I mean, we're lucky and very blessed that we have all these supporters, including many of the clinics. We have FQACs like Kali Plama and KKV who actually do what they normally do as FQACs and do comprehensive care. And majority of the Micronesians are Marshallese. We have a few Koshrians and Panapans and Chukis and Palauans and some Yapis as well, but majority are Marshallese. The rates of chronic conditions are the same across the board. I mean, we've done surveys among the Marshallese community, and up to 40% of the community in Marshallese suffer from diabetes, close as well as for pre-diabetes. 38% are about with hypertension as well. And they also have chronic conditions like heart disease from cholesterol and all those things. Why? We also have the same what they call the Marshallese diet, right? It's the canned goods, it's the processed meats, it's the chicken in the can, right? It's the preserved fruits and vegetables, things that we're used to growing up back in the islands, because that was a substitution for us to be healthy as opposed to eating the irradiated food that we're growing in our islands. Instead of going to those places and eat off the contaminated soils and from the lagoons, eat these USDA food. So our conditions are still the same. I think many of us tend to forget that when the nuclear weapons testing program happened, besides the direct effects of atomic test in terms of cancers and so the beta burns and leukemias and all these things, you also take away the culture. When you blow out an island off the face of the earth and you don't identify yourself with an island anymore, and you don't go and fish anymore, you don't go and plant your taros anymore, you don't go and pick your breadfruits anymore, but you go to the grocery stores to get those kind of foods, that's where all the chronic conditions come in. So when we come here to seek health care and we're told that we're not eligible for it, another problem. Because we're trying to do all the things that we're trying to take care of ourselves and our families. So thankfully, it's great that now we have Medicaid restoration for COFA citizens. And unlike Hawaii, because I think Hawaii was probably one of the quickest ones to turn around to institute Medicaid for all COFA citizens after we were signing the law December of 2020. In the state of Arkansas, you still have to kind of go through the process of fixing the systems that would understand what a COFA citizen is. So when you go to DHS and you say, I'm Marshallese, I'm like, okay, well, you don't qualify. Why? Well, the system is not fixed. So you still, despite a national change in the law, we still couldn't qualify. So people were still waiting. And then we finally fixed the system, they didn't have human resources to do it. You need people in the front line, and when you go and apply, they know who it is and how many applications to process. So it took months. It takes months to apply for Medicaid to get approval for it if you qualify for it. And we're still undergoing that process. We're still trying to fix that system. Fortunately, we have some contacts and people are trying to help us. And we have many support from the community. But again, it has to be a system change. I mean, it's great that we're making headway, but at the same time, it took 25 years to do that. I hope it doesn't take another 25 years to completely fix it. If we could have, and we're talking about Arkansas. I mean, Hawaii was quick. Imagine all the other states. We have a lot of Micronesians or COFA citizens who do not know us and who do not have any CBOs and who do not have any community leaders who are willing to go and be a voice. Because we're very humble people as well. Once they say, oh, you don't qualify, oh, okay. You move away and you don't argue. It's un-Micronesian to argue. It's un-Marshallese to argue. So there's still all these things that, I could go on and on, but I'm not. Because, there's all these challenges that we still face. It's great that we're making headway in different spaces. But again, I think the way that we're able to advance many of our issues has to do with the Micronesian way, with that relationship building and maintaining that relationship. Is that focusing on the family, focusing on the person. I think for us, it's about the family. And in Marshallese custom, family is the foundation. Like many other Pacific Islander beliefs and foundations as well. So as long as, somebody had mentioned it earlier, if we can institute a culture into these different system changes, then we're gonna make some changes that needs to be changed. Because it's not working at this point. It's slowly changing, but we need more change. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sheldon and Ms. Inlet. Keone, thank you for inviting me, and the only reason I came is because of Keone's uncle, which he mentioned as a PS in his email, and who is the retired senior associate dean at the John Burns School of Medicine, and Satoru Izutsu. So thank you, Keone. And I actually knew about Keone, but it didn't dawn on me who he was until yesterday. So I'm a little bit slow because his uncle had told me about him. It's an honor to be here, and also it's ironic that this outsider has the last say in terms of presentation. But it's both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing. After getting off the plane Friday night from Palau, Guam, all I wanted to do was sleep. But fortunately, I came here yesterday, and I thought I was going to sleep here, but it didn't happen. I was just so transfixed by all the voices. So I got to hear all the voices, and that's the blessing. The curse is I got to hear all the voices. And so understanding that irony, I'll just say a little bit of, I'm glad, thank you for the introduction, say a little bit about myself. The story I want to tell is about success and about heroes. And, I've been working in the Palau in 1968. That's when I first went there as a teacher, and like Nathan, a Peace Corps volunteer. And then it's a hokey story. I married a local nurse, and then I wanted to become a doctor. It gets worse and worse. And so I did pre-med at Boston University, and then applied to the John Burns School of Medicine. They don't accept out-of-staters, and I was accepted. And I'm not the Nobel laureate winner, and I really have valued the fact that I was given this incredible opportunity to become a doctor. And when I ended up in Hawaii, we were so poor, we were on food stamps, the highest amount of food stamps you could possibly get. But I was eligible for food stamps. And that was a beautiful thing. And I would have rent parties. I'd invite my colleagues in to, they'd charge them $25, and then I'd run down and get the beer. And, we'd have these parties, and this is very illegal. I'd wrap up canned hams as door prizes, which I got from the food stamps. So I hope nobody tells and leaks it back to the United States government. Anyway, I all of a sudden was given a scholarship by the U.S. Public Health Service, which just boosted us out of poverty, and just incredible. And then the downside, but it wasn't a downside for me, is I had to pay back 4 years. And I was assigned to Guam. And I wanted to go back to Palau, but they didn't have the program then. So Guam was great, and there were a lot of Palauans on Guam, and my wife was happy. So as long as she was happy, I could do my work. So that, at any rate, I joined the faculty of the John Burns School of Medicine, and since then I've been a medical educator, and I've just had an incredible amount of fun. And I helped set up and then run the Pacific Basin Medical Officers Training Program, which trains 70 indigenous physicians, most of them from the freely associated states, a few from American Samoa. And they became the backbone of healthcare over the years, who I got to work with. Yeah. So we had an incredible faculty. So, I was just telling Professor Enrico that Jimmy Samusoni worked for me, and then he went on to become the dean of the Fiji School of Medicine, a fellow Rotuman. I said, maybe you should make a film about him. But at any rate, so that was the John Bird School of Medicine, trained several physicians like Sheldon, but three came back to Palau to work there. And so, and then the Center for Disease Control placed a couple of people, one here in Honolulu who was head of the TB branch, and another who was assigned to Guam. And he had grown up in the outer islands of Yap and then became a family practitioner through the John Bird School of Medicine. And then went back to Yap and worked there and married the sweetheart from Yap next door, and ended up in Guam as the representative for CDC. So that the stage was almost set, and the president of Palau at the time was a very, I think, a courageous guy and well known for his work on climate change, Tommy Rumeso. And then the Minister of Health was another graduate from the John Bird School of Medicine, a board-certified surgeon, Mice Roberts. And then the big element was the pandemic. And Palau, in response to the announcement by WHO that this was a worldwide pandemic, Mice Roberts, with the advice of his Emergency Operations Center's team, went to the president and requested that Palau close its borders. And this was in March of 2020. And, that's an incredible thing to do. And the business community was totally against it, all right? And the American ambassador was totally against it. And the pressures that were being brought on the president were incredible. He closed the borders on the advice of Mice Roberts. And closing the borders from both maritime and by air, that's actually a fairly well-documented strategy to deal with pandemics. 100 years previously, the American naval officer who was assigned as the governor of American Samoa closed the borders to prevent a ship from coming in that had the Spanish flu. And the ship did come in, but everybody was in quarantine. 50 miles away, Western Samoa did not close its borders. And a ship with the Spanish flu came in from New Zealand. And it stopped in Fiji first, and they quarantined it, and they flew up the yellow flag, which is an international recognition that this ship needs to be quarantined. They let the ship go, and it came into Apia Harbor. And the captain had brought the yellow flag down, so nobody knew the ship was contaminated, and there were people dying on the ship. And so people walked off the ship and by their very ineffective public health screening and onto the island. Within weeks, 22% of the islands had died. Almost 50% of the talking chiefs died. And to this day, the adverse impact of that a cultural disaster, thousands of years of cultural memory had been wiped out. And it's still felt today now what's called Samoa. So CDC then did a study of the islands that had strict maritime quarantine at the time, and those so-so quarantine, and those with no quarantine. And the death toll, if you just went from island to island, and the governor of Western Samoa let that ship continue on and went on to Tonga. And they had even worse death rates. Okay, it was terrible. And so wherever that ship went, death followed. Depending upon what the quarantine status was, whether it was strict, whether it was so-so, or whether there was none at all. So it was this laboratory experiment of one culture, the Samoans, in American Samoa, and then in Western Samoa. And so 2 years later, the naval commander, who had organized the talking chiefs into like a American Samoan Navy, and they're the ones that prevented the other ships from coming in. He was awarded, given an award by the U.S. government. And when he left, the people cried, and they named a high school after him. In Western Samoa, the governor went home in disgrace. So that was the difference. So what I'm just trying to say is that as a public health strategy at that time, closing the borders was essential. Well, that's what happened in Palau. They closed the borders. And luckily, the Palauans missed the Alpha variant. And they missed the deadly Delta variant. And by the time, with Operation Warp Speed, and there's no vaccine hesitancy in Palau, most of the population were vaccinated and some were boosted. And so when Omicron came in, it really was very mild. It swept through those people who even had vaccines, but it did kill about 7 people. Okay, 7 Palauans died. Many more Palauans died outside of Palau than died inside of Palau. Many more Marshallese died outside of the Marshall Islands than they did inside the Marshalls because of those strategies. And this was about heroes, the all hands on deck approach, and 2 CDC officers, one in Hawaii here, Dick Brostrom, and the other Thane Hancock in Guam, okay, who organized US federal resources from ASPR, the Associate Secretary of Prevention and Response, of boots on the ground to come in, and there was only one ventilator in Palau. I called it the national ventilator. And sometimes it worked. Well, then all of a sudden we had 30 ventilators, and we had the laboratory resources. And then, in came people to actually help the health care team in Palau. And it was the healthcare team in Palau that actually designed the whole operation. It wasn't from the outside. So they get the credit, Minister Robertson and his team. And so this was actually a story of success. For the last days, yesterday and today, I heard about the tears and the racism and the ineligibility for this and that. It just goes on and breaks your heart. But this was an example of something that actually worked. And as Dr. Enrico said, where do we go from here? Okay, with the compact. And now that the new compacts are being negotiated, there are clever, smart people on our side. When I say our side, I mean the FAS side, who are really, I think, hopefully representing, but us certainly who are living and working in the jurisdictions, but also I hope that they are adequately representing the COFA residents outside. When you're working in the jurisdictions, there are so many problems there, you're not really thinking about the problems of the COFA populations in the US. Otherwise, you're going to go mentally ill. And so, we're focusing on the NCD epidemic, which is a slow-moving train wreck. The COVID came in and all these resources came in with regards to COVID, but the real killer continues to be the NCD epidemic that's ongoing. And so trying to address that and trying to address the, MCH issues that are in the covenant. So now I've got 1 minute. Anyway, I'm supposed to say something inspirational in 1 minute so that you go away feeling, warm and fuzzy about the program. look, there's a lot of terrible things that are going on, and we can tell the terrible stories, all right? But there are some good things going on too, about success and heroes. There are individuals really count. Individuals where we are really count. And they need to be supported and nurtured. So I want to thank you very much for this opportunity, Keone. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe one question, time for one question. Okay, I don't want to, this is a long day. I just want to point out while I'm waiting for the lovely Maddie to come in. Okay. Oh, this is sort of what I was going to ask. I just want to point out, especially to the law students, all the policy and law that was woven into these stories, right? Whether it was the Basic Health Hawaii, which was a policy decision that was then followed up by a court case that went up to the Ninth Circuit, but the organizing that went on after that led to the victory of winning restoration of Medicaid benefits for everyone across the whole country, which I think was kept alive very much by people on the ground organizing, in addition to some of our diplomats and politicians and leaders, both back home and here. And so just all the ways that policy and all these policies that Dr. Greg's talking about, like that led to things like the Pacific Basin training programs, that these are policy decisions that government officials decide to put money behind, right? And so we should really, really think about that in the positions that we are and the people that they impact. So I really appreciate all of your stories. Oh my gosh, there's such good questions. Oh my goodness. So, how much time? Oh gosh, you guys are really. I like this one. In comparing Arkansas to Hawaii, guess who this might be for? Specific to the healthcare systems treating Micronesian patients, what are some of the positives in Arkansas? Same for Hawaii. In short, what are some things each state does better? I can answer that, but I will defer to my panel.
I guess I can speak for, in Arkansas, what I see in Arkansas that's different than how we do things in Hawaii. They've been listening and they actually do action. When they actually come to the community and say, what do you need? And we tell them, and they actually do it. So when they say, well, we want to work with the community in addressing what do they want. Also, well, why don't you ask the community? And they do. They hold focus groups with community members and ask them, what are your health priorities? What do you want us as an institution to address? And they list it down. And diabetes has always been number one. That's part of the reason why UMS has been focused on diabetes prevention and management at this point. Not just that, but they don't stop there. Then they do things and they report back to the community. But as they're doing things, before they do any kind of project with the community, they ask permission from the community. They have community advisory board members who are part of the university that are marshallese, whether they're community leaders, they're pastors, they're laypersons, but they have community advisory board members who are marshallese. And when they say no, they don't do it. They go to the next step. They say, well, is it culturally appropriate for us to do this? When they say no, they don't do it. They actually listen when we actually tell them things. They start with the staff, then they go with the community, but that's how things and we've been working well together also with many of the community-based organizations as well. So we always tell them, the researchers, because research it's usually a taboo language, right? It's usually a bad word. It's like experiment, right? Because we've been researched on so many times, but we come with a different angle and say, well, this is more capacity building. How do we help you become what you want to be? We're not going to tell you what it is. We're here, we got the skills to do things, but you tell us how we should approach it. And they actually listen, and that's why they have 30 plus community members working at the Office of Community Health, right? It's community health, it's not just research, right? It's addressing community health, public health that is culturally appropriate. So if you really look down, you do your literature search on Marshallese health in terms of diabetes or other things, many of those papers are coming out of Arkansas. And all these things that we do, and we do all the projects, we come back to the community and do town halls, and we report back to them the findings before we do anything else with them. If they don't want us to publish it, then we don't. And then the same thing with the many other organizations. They actually, besides UMS, Community Clinic, which is an APO, has several Marshallese navigators and community health workers. Hospice also has some. They try to instill at least one Marshallese CHW in different organizations, including the dialysis center. Springdale School District has several Marshallese liaisons who work between parents and the school system. And so they listen, they do things, and that's the difference from what I see. And what they see us as part of them, we're part of the solution. We're part of being actively taking care of our own community. And we feel like we're part of the community in many of the things they do, including board members for the banks, for the Chamber of Commerce, for what you name it. There's at least a Marshallese person there that's actually representing the community for the interest of the community.
And to add to what Dr. Reckland talked about, we are fortunate to build those relationships earlier in the movement, and we are blessed to have some of those champions that are actually working with the organizations that is dealing with a lot of the health care for us. There's many of our clinical focus group that is being done within the community, and we don't call it research or whatever, like what Dr. Sheldon is talking about. We talk story with them, and in many organizations like we are Oceania and Micronesian Health Advisory Coalition, there are some organizations that are not even 501c that are behind the scene, like the ministers would. We have our elders and our ministers that we talk story with and share. So during the pandemic, we had that minister's wood from the beginning of the pandemic, and it goes on until today. And that's a space that really reach out to the community and hear their stories and find out how can we help. And because I work at the KKV Health Clinic, they really focus on listening to the need of the community. And as many of our champions that are here in this room, Tina and Teisha, I cannot forget, all the hard work they have done to help us where we are today. And also with the story of the soldiers, even though we didn't find many of our soldiers at that time of the health, we had some of them that came. I remember one young man himself coming to our town hall meeting, and he was like, "What you guys are doing? You know, you're wasting time." And he had a bottle. He had a bottle of his drink in his McDonald cup, and I knew because I can smell it. And I said, "Put your word and your action where it counts. And I want you to come tomorrow and sit in the focus group and hear what is really going on." Because I knew that he sacrificed his life from high school. Fresh out of high school, he was in the Iraq War. And then he came back, PTSD, and was misdirected and confused and didn't even value his own life. But he came and joined Dina's focus group, and that changes all his perspective on life and the word of what he can do for the next generation. So I want to take this opportunity to thank all the champions that have worked with us during those hard time to make our stories be counted. I see some of them in the room. Mary, if I don't say your name, know that our heart really is in place and thankful for you standing alongside us. Mike is always patiently sitting there and nudging us and asking questions, but his heart is always with the young educators, young boys and girls that are finding their way in school, and continue to support them through means. And that is health. Education is part of health. Having a home over your head is part of health. During the pandemic, we see a lot of things happening to our community that was harsh. Thanks to Shanti's hard work in the state, we're able to help our families that have found loved ones that died because of the pandemic. I always said, one is enough. One death in our community is enough for us to be shaken up and do something about it. And many of those champions that are here in this room did something about it and be part of that dark story to make the changes. Natalie, I cannot even say anymore. I forget names when I look out. I forget names every day, but I am very thankful for these relationships that are built that makes a difference for the health of our community. And when our land is healthy, our people are healthy.
Can I just add, I know it's long overdue, but one of our champs and one of the supporters way in the beginning, as we were organizing ourselves and find funds to fund our lawyers, it was also Leanne and her students that also came from CNMI. She reminded me yesterday, and my apologies for not following through the many things that we had talked about. But there were many champions out there, so really want to recognize all of you, because without your support, many of the things that we were trying to achieve could not have been done without you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Okay, this is going to be the last really quick 5-second answer. How do we find joy in the struggle for equality and justice? And I will just add to this really quickly. For me, finding partners that keep us accountable. Has no problem calling me out when she needs to, but also organizing alongside the communities that you're saying that you serve is everything. And being able to form those relationships, it always comes back to the relationships. Thank you, Mary, for reminding us in the very first moment of this conference started, that having relationships like I've had have been such a privilege because not only will they hold you accountable, but you're never going to laugh as hard or cry as hard or maybe have a little after dinner drink together that solidifies your relationships that push all of this work forward. But the last 5-second question, how do we find joy in the struggle for equality and justice? What keeps you going?
My kids and my grandkids.
The development of universal health care in Palau.
Our partners, our loved ones, our family. My husband has been my Superman along the fight, and I am thankful for our partners and our spouse and our families, but most especially, as you see, our children. Every time I work with these kids, they keep me on my toes every day, and they are my joy as well, and they make me happy. And every day, I knew there is a better tomorrow because of them.
Thank you. Sorry, Keone, before I turn it over back to you, I just want to say a quick personal and collective thank you. As having the privilege of being the very last panel, I just want to say a quick thank you to APLPJ. You folks are amazing. And especially to Keone, of course, for showing us that when you center Micronesian voices, stories, and people, you really see the brilliance and the excellence, the diversity and the realities. You see the hope and the solutions for our future. You actually get to see the great privilege, what I have the great privilege of seeing every day in my work. I'm the luckiest attorney in the world. This gathering is truly groundbreaking, and I think I really want to thank you on behalf of all the speakers. I think I can be as bold as to say that, for convening so much brilliance and love in our law school today. Chief Justice Richardson would truly be proud of all of you. Congratulations to you all. I wish I could have afforded to buy 17, but on behalf of all of you, I will give this one to Keone. So thank you so much.
If you're one of the 17, could you also stand up, please? Could you stand up if you're APLPJ? Thank you. Can you identify? Thank you so much. Thank you. They're in the crowd. They're all around. Thank you so much. Thank you also to our panel. Thank you. Please feel free to stay seated. I'm just going to say a couple things. The first thing I wanted to say is that this whole symposium was like deeply personal to me, and I think you folks saw that manifested in many different ways. I was also admonished not to. Yeah. So I just want to thank you all for being here, and a lot of the panels that we were able to curate today, the prompts, the questions that we asked were. Sorry. Were questions that I've been asking myself for a long time, and on immigration, on health, and it was truly a privilege to be able to curate all of these voices. They're the best people I could think of. As Dr. Dever said, my uncle spoke about the work that he did in Micronesia, training the physicians, indigenous physicians, 70, and the work of Dr. Dever. And these are the people that I know who are most qualified to speak to these issues. And it's deeply meaningful that we were able to get you folks. And so with that, Okay, it's getting better. With that, I just want to say that this symposium was intended to curate the best voices that I know that can answer the questions that I've had. If I was able to ask Joanne Litt myself, I would have. If I could ask Dr. Dever myself, Dr. Rick Law, and Auntie Eno. But I wanted them to answer it in front of everyone. And I wanted it to be recorded, and I wanted it to be archived. And a lot of our speakers today are submitting their remarks for publication as columns in our journal. They will be on our website. They'll be citable. They'll be shareable. These recordings will get sliced into sessions and available on YouTube after. So the next step, I'm hoping that people, not only just you folks, but people in Washington will watch these videos when it's time to vote on things, when it's time to listen to people's hearings and testimony, that they'll be able to hear these voices instead of what's in existence already, which is not much. So thank you all for being here. Thanks again to our amazing team. I want to emphasize that my head would be underwater if it was not for the rest of our staff who, you've seen me, I've just sat here throughout symposium. And from start to finish, they have just, made it so successful. And so my deepest gratitude and appreciation to our team and to all of you who are tuning in online, virtually, via live, all of you in person here today, and to everyone who, in one way or another, might see this on demand in the future. So once again, a round of applause to this panel and to all of you. Thank you. Thank you again for coming. We'll get a photo, if we can get a photo of our panel. Thank you again, everyone.